Hi, my name is Betsy Ashton. I'm part of the Smith Mountain Arts Council, and I welcome you to our second edition of Visions and Perspectives. We had an opera singer on last time for the vocal arts. Today we are going to meet with Leah Weiss for the literary arts. Before we get started, I want to thank Heather and Margaret for setting us up with this wonderful studio event. We're very happy to be part of the Lifestyle and Lake group for a half an hour, and we thank them very much for their participation in this and for helping us make Visions and Perspectives live. And with that, I am going to introduce Leah Weiss, who is our guest this for the next half hour. Leah is a best-selling author. She is a true Southern girl. And when I read her first book, because I read it twice, If the Creek Don't Rise, I realized we had an authentic Southern voice writing literature again. Born in North Carolina, raised in the foothills of Virginia, Leah has the cadence down perfectly. She is a retired executive assistant at the Virginia Episcopal School, and her first published novel, If the Creek Don't Rise, came out in August of 2017 after she retired. She is living proof you don't have to be 21 years old to publish a bestseller. I am very excited about her new book. She's going to talk to us about All the Little Hopes, which is coming out in July. Ready for pre-order now. I'm sorry. Plug. I do that. But I think you're going to find that in listening to Leah talk about her writing career, where she writes, why she chose If the Creek Don't Rise, because she had me at Sadie Blue, that's her character, and All the Little Hope, we're going to have a nice time. It's going to be a free-for-all. If you have questions, please put them in the comments section. And let me just say, welcome, Leah. I'm so happy to see you again.
Thank you, Betsy. It's wonderful. I've missed you a lot. So we'll have lunch soon, as we promised.
We will have lunch soon now that we have had our jabs, as they say in Britain.
Right.
Indeed. Leah, I know our viewers, and this will be on Facebook Live, and then it will also be on our SMACTube channel on YouTube. We get a lot of people coming into that YouTube channel, so they're going to want to know a lot about what it's like to be a writer. And I know you didn't publish until after you retired, but when did you actually start writing?
Well, I wasn't one of those writers who said, I wrote my first story at 3. I had my first novel at 10. In other words, it was in their blood. I went through my childhood, through my college, through my first marriage, even into my life as a single woman. And it was in my 50s, my mid-50s, that I was on a spiritual quest, and in communicating with my mentor, he commented that I had such an interesting voice, writing voice. And he said, there's all these wonderful little insertions of humor. And he asked, had I ever thought about writing? And I said, well, gosh, I've done a few things writing for a magazine years ago, but I really never thought about writing a book or a story because there's a lot of competition out there, and it is truly an uphill climb for the beginner. But I was inspired to start writing about my mother's memories. And I'm always going to be grateful for the fact that I took time then to sit down with her with a little tape recorder, the old-fashioned tape recorder, and ask questions about this woman who was one of 15 children raised on a tobacco farm with no running water and no electricity. In fact, my mother's name, Lucy, is the name of one of the protagonists in the second book, All the Little Hopes, and also is set in Eastern North Carolina, where my mother was. So I cut my writing teeth on memoirs. She died shortly afterwards. We had no idea that she had lung cancer or that she had such few precious months with us. So forever, I will be grateful for taking some of those stories and inspiring me to try to put stories on paper that made some sense and that had that beginning, middle, and punchline at the end. I then moved into some short story contests. In fact, that was the inspiration for the first book, If the Creek Don't Rise, because Sadie Blue's story was my first National Bookstore story win. And the little opening prompt for that month was, I struggle to my feet. And I had for probably a year and a half or 2 years been writing short story contests, winning not, but being able to examine the stories that did win and finding that they were much deeper and more raw than the memoir type writing that I had done with my mother that was a more protective style of writing. So Sadie Blue became the inspiration for the first book, but it wasn't until 2017 that a book came out. So for 12 years, I had struggled through, including writing my first novel that did not find an agent. And therefore I knew wasn't ready to publish and move into mainstream traditional publishing. So I kept at it, but it was a long road, and I'm not quite sure why I did keep at it, except it was a marvelous challenge.
Well, I can tell you, I am very happy you kept at it. I have told so many people about If the Creek Don't Rise. And I don't know how many books I'm responsible for selling, but I do want a royalty on a few of them.
Okay.
So you didn't start writing until you were in your
57, yeah, something like that.
Okay. After your mother passed, I kind of had a similar background because my mother passed of lung cancer as well. And she passed before my first book was out, but not before she could read the draft. So I was lucky there. But all of us have our different ways of writing. What is your daily or weekly writing life like when you're in the death throes of a novel?
Well, I'm not disciplined when it comes to saying I'm going to write from 1 to 5 this afternoon. I know writers who do that, and they're doing that in order to try to save their energy and to come in fresh. They know when it's their best time. I'm busy writing, golly, off and on. And as you said, the throes of writing, because that's a very different part of the process. When it is there, when the characters are speaking to you, when you really can understand what motivates that character, and when they start finishing the sentences for you, when you're writing along with them, then it's very hard to let go of it. Although I do know when I do step away from the laptop, and which is mostly what I do, I don't handwrite things out unless I do have just a notebook and I happen to be away from my laptop. But it's that time away when I'm taking a walk or when we're traveling or something. That's also the churning that's taking place, and you're solving things that are happening. But the one I can talk to most is about If the Creek Don't Rise, because at that point I was living a single life, heading toward retirement, had lost both my mother and my love Jim with these huge blocks of time that I could fill. So it was an obsessive thing that was both a curiosity, because I would throw words on the paper that they're talking and throw half of them away or more. And for me, the weekends were all inclusive to the writing. I could be writing at 3 or 4 in the morning because I had no one else to be accountable to. I wasn't being interrupted by children or grandchildren. So when you don't have that, it's very easy for you just to go into your almost nodding. And then sometimes when you read it the next day, you say, what was I thinking? But it was probably throwing 1 million words on a page in order to get my good 80,000. So that's what you do, don't you? I mean, it is sacrificing or killing your darlings all the time. So
yeah, Stephen King and everyone else is right when they talk about killing your darlings. You have to get rid of those words that are your favorites and those passages that are brilliant but don't work. How many drafts do you think you do? I will say I am at least a 20 draft writer, and
that would probably, 20 could be a good idea, because it's. I want to go back to a real quick reference to at the beginning of my early life. I was a classical pianist and I won a music scholarship. And so my whole life was spent around taking a large work and breaking it down and conquering it. You know, if you're going to be doing a sonata or something and you're having to go through, you find your weak spots. So for me, that 20 draft, and I know you're thinking the same thing, isn't the whole thing.
Mm-mm.
It's often finding those weak spots or the spots that have empty holes that need plugging. So it is a sporadic thing, and I'm always looking for my weakest spots.
Mhm.
I'm always looking for the ones that sort of let me down, or verbally as I'm reading out loud, just don't have that wonderful flow. So it is a nauseating thing to do, and in terms of, watching grass grow is much more entertaining than watching a writer write. But it is when you do that, when you know that that is your goal, that part of my introspection that has me patiently look for and seek. And you know as well, Betsy, from your great books, that when those characters start talking to you and taking you places you weren't planning to go, you know you are on the pipeline. And that's the exciting part of the writing. And it's very hard to pull away. And when you do leave the laptop, the mind is always there pulling you back to that. One of the things, too, I love about writing is, and this is something that took me a while to be patient about, but I paint myself into the corners all the time, or I should say my characters do. In the first book, Sadie Blue's grandmother, Gertie, she says to me, that's the last time Walter beat up on me. At one point when we had gone through a really rough situation, me, the writer, said, well, I wonder what she did. What happened? And you'd think that I would say, well, now I get to do this to that character, but I don't. I'm waiting until that character comes forth with, in this case, a very universal, amazing delivery of restitution that was very, very satisfying. So you paint yourself into a corner, you keep listing, you keep writing, and then the story comes clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the awesome, I think it was, event when I was writing my first book, and I had a character that I thought was a minor character until one morning, about 3 a.m, there's this voice is screaming, literally screaming in my head, saying, this is my story, damn it, get out of my way and let me tell it. And I went, yes, ma'am. It's like,
yes.
Okay.
It is a spooky thing. It's almost like you're tapping into some greater or higher power, or you do begin to believe in spirits and the stories that they leave behind or carry with them. So yes, I know exactly what you mean. This second book, All the Little Hopes, was an interesting challenge. My agent said, I want you to write a plot-driven book instead of character-driven, and I want you to have only 1 or 2 characters telling the story. And this went through 3 completely different storylines, characters. It was a difficult thing until finally the 2 appropriate characters stepped to the forefront with their coming-of-age story set in World War II. That was just a delight. But if I had given up, or if I had settled for something earlier, or in the case of Rebecca, my agent, saying at one point, you have 2 plot lines you got to choose. And so choosing what I thought was going to be the big focus and letting that be a backstory. There's so many important decisions you're doing through the process. I don't understand people who can outline it and follow an outline and it come out right. At the end, the joy to me is both the research and finding my characters who then lead me to the story. So that's extraordinarily satisfying.
So you say you like to be surprised by your characters.
I am, yes, all the time. In Sadie Blue's story, for example, we know it opened when she was pregnant. And we know that there was this interesting, both a friendship, but a battle between she and the teacher that came to the mountain, Kate Shaw. There is a moment in the book, midway, when we don't know whether Sadie Blue is going to miscarry or not. She is on a precipice that's extraordinarily dangerous. I'm writing that scene not knowing what is going to happen. It was, is she going to keep the baby? Is she going to lose the baby? And I'm typing, I'm in this setting. I write very cinematically. I really love to envelop you, me, everyone into this real life scene. And here comes the conclusion, and I'm crying. And it was just an amazing surprise that was really what should have happened for all the right reasons. So those are wonderful, fun parts when you're sitting in the dark or sitting alone in a room, making a story come to life.
They're rare moments, but when they happen, they are absolute treasures.
Yes, yes.
I have a question in the chat room. You said earlier you go through about 1 million words to get down to 80,000. And the question is that about the standard for the types of books you and I write?
No, I would also include all of I write pages and pages of ideas. Mm-hmm. I write pages and pages of research. And a lot of my research can be online, but there are also wonderful documentaries I come across. So I'm sitting there with my laptop open, pulling out amazing information. For example, If the Creek Don't Rise had two plotline or two important components. One was moonshine and the other was ginseng hunting. So it happened that on a TV channel, there was a long running series, and there I am gathering valuable lessons from all places. Sometimes when I'm looking for characters' names, I watch the credits at the end and pick out fun things, and I'm making a list, which, by the way, my clue for character development is I keep an alphabetized list of all of my characters, my primary and my secondary. And I really try hard not to have a name be with two L's or two of them with a D or something. I try to keep them distinct. If it's two names with a D, they're going to be so different in rhythm and tone, you won't get them confused. But that's another wonderful exercise. So I'm not sure if I was being facetious about 1 million words equaling my 80,000, but it is it's years. For me, it takes about 4 years, 3 to 4 years to write a book. So it is many different steps that's happening in that. And if I were to compile all of those, the trees I would have sacrificed in my piles of paper would be quite dramatic. So I don't know. You think that answered her question?
I think it did. I read obituaries.
That's a great one, especially great obituaries.
And just the vital records that you see. I'm setting a book in a locale close to where I live at Smith Mountain Lake. And so I read the local obits to see who are the most popular names so that I don't use them.
Good for you. Good for you.
And yes. That's so much fun. Yeah. Before we move on to All the Little Hopes, I have a question here for Leah, ma'am, and the question is, what was the inspiration behind your title, If the Creek Don't Rise?
That's a good question. I didn't choose it. My first story titles were Sadie Blue. Another time it was Baines Creek, which was the community on the mountain. I think and so I bow to the hard work of Source Books, Landmark, who is my publisher, because they are the experts when it comes to knowing what represents the South in terms of good Southern writing, but also what is going to be catchy and maybe memorable. Mm-hmm. So I remember they had passed on a number of suggested titles, of which some of them make me, when I say cringe, there was one they were thinking about called The Ballad of Miss Loretta, about Loretta Lynn, which is a tiny reference in the book about Sadie Blue's love of Loretta Lynn. And I said, oh my gosh, I'd have to rewrite the book to do justice. And who wants to touch an icon like Miss Loretta? So that was off the table. So I was grateful that they listened to me when I had some serious pushback. But the day came when they said, we have the title. And of course, the creek does refer to Baines Creek, but also to a Southern title that anyone in the South is familiar with, If the Good Lord Willin' and the Creek Don't Rise. So in fact, they had first said, and the creek don't rise. And I said, no, we have to put that preposition back in there because it is if the creek don't rise. And it was really making a nod to this community that in this book, which was an interesting format with 10 stories, 10 characters, it was the community of Baines Creek that became the primary character, and that was the center hub for the whole book. So that was the nod for it. very quickly, I will tell you that somebody had said to me, do you know that that really is a saying that was done back in around 1750 and referred to the Creek Indians, because it was a military thing where the military man said, if the good Lord willing and the creek with a capital C don't rise, which now all of a sudden is grammatically correct, but it doesn't have the same reference. That was where it originally came. In fact, someone said, I wondered if this was about the Creek Indians. And I said, no, I didn't know about that. So,
no.
So if the creek don't rise was all the doings of, and I, it was a little jolting simply because as a writer, you kind of grab what you're used to, but I have been honored with that title and think that it really represents the book well.
Good. I think that answers our question.
Do we know who ma'am is?
Yeah, we do. Thank you. I want to move on to All the Little Hopes, because this is really different from If the Creek Don't Rise. And
I am really happy with this book. It is.
I can't wait to read it.
Oh, thank you. Because, If the Creek Don't Rise was a rather brutal book that had some components that came from that first short story, When. That was my inspiration. But I'm not that kind of a heavy down into the hard part of life. And what I chose to do in Creek was to interject a lot of humor. But All the Little Hopes really does speak well to my heart and my mother's upbringing in Eastern North Carolina, although we do travel back to the mountains of Western North Carolina near the end of the book. And it came from a memory. Remember, I was interviewing my mother, and one of these days when the tape recorder is going and we're talking about her experience on the tobacco farm, she said to me that in 1944 that there were German POWs helping on tobacco market floor. And she said, we were told not to look at them or speak to them. And I remember thinking that if my husband or my brothers were ever captured, I hope that they would not be shunned in this way. Now, that was in pages and pages and pages of memories, but I thought, I've never heard about German POWs in my home state. And I wondered if anybody had, and I asked, and on the internet, I found 2 PhD theses and 1 hardback book in 2005, and I copied them and ordered them, and I sort of put them away. I thought that they were going to be the inspiration for this book, but they are a very big component. And the truth of the matter is that there were 750,000 German POWs that came to America to work in 46 states. And in my home state of North Carolina, there were 18 camps. And one of those camps was in the little town I was born in. And I was able to access the history of that specifically from their historical society in Isla Parker, who was so generous with me in Williamston. So I thought that that was going to be my thrust. And then here comes these 2 narrators, Lucy and Alibert Tucker, who tell me that they are great fans of Nancy Drew. They're interested in solving a mystery. And lo and behold, a man goes missing and another man goes missing. So we've got this wonderful thrust with all of these pieces of World War II history woven in between. That is a lot of fun to read. I've had a lot of people say that they're constantly researching, those who've read the early draft, and finding so much of it true. So that's been a great joy to stand sort of in my mother's footsteps, certainly in the sandy soils that I was raised in. So yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for asking about it.
I have one question, and then I'm going to ask you, would you like to read just a little bit from...
Okay, super.
Okay. I want to ask a question. Which character in Creek are you most like?
Oh gosh, don't we all wish we were as smart as Bertie or as sweethearted as Maris? I think I'm probably as close to the teacher, not only because of her being well read. I mean, if you're asking who my favorite characters are, that's a different question. But I also really resonate with Kate's insecurities and her
Mhm.
questionings about things. We can look confident and about things, and then inside we're saying, oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't said that, or did I sound cocky, or do I know what I'm talking about? So Kate was, and I also adored her sparring with the preacher when they were talking about spirituality. So that was a great joyful relief from all of the mountain dialect that I was working so hard to authenticate. So here comes, Kate to the mountain and in a strange place and thriving. So that's great. What I'd like to read, Betsy, is just the first page and a half. It's the prologue of All the Little Hopes. So I want to show this at the beginning. There is an interesting sketch at the top, and it is part rabbit, part roebuck, part falcon wings. And I say that because I want you to have a visual image in a paragraph in this prologue. And it is written by the character Lucy, who is 13. The book takes place in 1943, 44, and 45. We are an innocent lot, my 2 brothers, 4 sisters, and me, born on as ordinary a land as God ever made. Our tobacco farm in Riverton, North Carolina, is far from almost soaring mountains in the Black Forest of Germany, where tall trees dim the light of day, and the tales of the Brother Grimm grow out of the lonely soil, where even a polished apple holds peril. Her stories raise the hairs on the backs of our necks, and fear prickles and chills our skin. Telling tales is almost best talent. After, when prayers are said, and we're tucked in our feather bed, and the house turns still as stone, I lie between Cora and Lydia, and we remember, and clutch hands until our grips soften, safe in this place, for our grandmother's stories live far across the sea, but they are real because of the Wolpertinger. Alma's grandfather came upon the creature in 1881 while hunting, and he preserved it for all time. It is 17¼ inches long and is equal part rabbit, roebuck antlers, and falcon wings. Because Wolpertingers thrive only in crisp air filtered through evergreens and washed clean in clouds, we'll never see Wolpertingers in Mercer County. Our humid air is too heavy to conduct magic. The creature came to America in a wooden box with a hinged door, and for the years Oma lives with us, it resides on top of her Bavarian armoire. We take turns cleaning it with a feather duster, but we never touch its eyes, for they are hazy and off-kilter. Of her 7 grandchildren, I am Oma's favorite. In private, she tells me so. It's because I am curious and have a deductive mind. I collect obscure words like misnomer for contradiction and knave for someone dishonest. My favorite word is enigma, for without mystery to challenge a curious mind, it starves. My brother Grady calls me high and mighty for using $10 words in a 10-cent town. Out loud, I call him rude, but inside my head, I know he's a chuff. Mama says I can be insensitive. She said language is meant to communicate, not separate. So I mostly spend $10 words inside my head. Oma never returns to Germany. She dies in Riverton on the 20th of May, and a granite tombstone is etched with a mountain sketch we've only seen on the page of a travel book in our library. At her passing, our hope for thrilling danger passes with her. We fear nothing will happen here where a lazy river rolls by. Outsiders are rare, and farming rules our days. We think we are safe here, where nothing happens until something comes that undoes us all. So.
Wow.
So I was watching our clock. I'm so sorry. I was
No, we're fine.
So,
we are fine. I have one more question for you, and it's one that you're going to want to answer, and that's, where can we buy your books?
Oh gosh, well, anywhere. They will, obviously you can go and order from your indie. I'm a huge boost for our indies. If you go to my website, which is simply leahweiss.com, link, that's got to all different kinds of places. So any bookstore, in fact, you can, if The Creek Don't Rise is in every Barnes and Noble, every Books A Million, and all of the indies, probably those who really cater more to Southern writers. So look up your indie and support them and go in and order them there. I'm not sure if I'm going to be signing a lot of books that will go out to some key ones before that you may get. But anyone through my website who reaches out to me, I'm happy to send a book plate or something like that for them.
Terrific.
It's been a delightful day. And
it's fun here.
Thank you, Betsy, for your great support. And it's wonderful to talk to a fellow writer and talk about issues we both know so well. Thank you so much, dear.
Well, thank you. The next Vision and Perspective will be with Whitney Brock, and it will be about painting. So it's coming in May. Whitney is a local artist. Most of us know her. Do check the SMAC Facebook page, our YouTube channel, our website, and you will get information on where these where Whitney is going to appear. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you tuning in today, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Betsy.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Just flew by, as you knew it would.